Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thank you for joining us for a timely and important discussion. American Resilience, the Future of Small Business. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Wells Fargo, for its support of today's event. Small businesses, some prefer to call them young businesses and ventures and rising businesses, or small businesses that will be big, are fundamental to the idea of this nation and essential to the financial health of America. In these trying times, as customers stay home and small business owners attempt to scramble and stay afloat, lifelines have been offered, but are they doing the job? The $660 billion Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, to help small firms retain workers and remain viable, has supported many owners, founders, and employees, but the results have been wobbly and uneven. And let me just say today, we have today the fact that America's economy contracted by 33%, 22% of small businesses in America have shut their doors since the beginning of this crisis. As Congress prepares another stimulus package with additional help for struggling small businesses, we're going to take stock and examine if these efforts are adequate in reaching those that really need the aid, particularly minority-owned businesses that are often overlooked and left on the sidelines. After these programs end, what additional stimulus initiatives will be needed to keep firms healthy and ready to reopen fully on the other side of the pandemic? We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers, key policymakers with small business experience, advocates, and small business owners themselves, some really, really cool ones. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHill. We are broadcasting live and will be taking your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Refreshing the page should, in most cases, fix the problem. Excuse me if I laugh a little bit about that. To help kick off the program, I'm joined by the first woman in U.S. history to be elected both a governor and a United States senator. She's also a former small business owner and a former ranking member of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. Earlier this year, as the pandemic started shuttering small businesses across the nation, she was quick to introduce legislation to provide support and ease the pressure on small firms. Welcome, New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Senator, great to see you again. Let me just ask you point blank. I didn't know you were a small business owner, and so that was a surprise to me. If you were a small business owner today and not a U.S. senator, what would you feel you would be facing right now in this terrible time?
Well, the small business my husband and I had was not just a small business, it was also a seasonal business. And for those seasonal businesses, they're really getting a double whammy right now. And in New Hampshire, we have tourism as our second largest industry. So many of those seasonal businesses are really very hard hit because they depend on this time right now to get them through the rest of the year. And if they're not doing well, then they're going to be in trouble. Not just right now, but in the future. So what most small businesses want and what I would have wanted was some way to ensure that I was helped and I could keep my employees on, not just right now, but also for the long term. And the PPP program that we set up, I think has done, despite some of the glitches, has done a good job. In New Hampshire, we've got over 23,000 businesses that have benefited to the tune of about $2.5 billion. They've kept about 200,000 people employed. So it's been helpful, but for many of them, they are now running out of those dollars if they applied early to the program, and particularly if they're in the hospitality industry. Restaurants have been particularly hard hit because they were the first to close down and they're the last to open. And so many of those businesses are running out of that first round of loans, and they're looking for additional help to get through this next period, so a sort of a bridge loan. But for many of them, they're also thinking about long-term and how can they keep going long-term. And certainly those are concerns that I would have had if my husband and I still had our business.
Well, Senator, you were influential in getting the expiration of PPP, as I understand it, extended to August 8th. Now, as I look at my calendar, August 8th is around the corner. We saw these horrific economic numbers today, a 33% contraction in our economy since this began. I mean, I don't think anybody in this lifetime has seen numbers that large. And so we've got horrific side there. PPP is trying to keep those that are still alive. And when you look at the number of small businesses that have already shuttered, it's 22%. That's more than a fifth of all small business in America. So I guess my question to you is, what has to happen after that August 8th date? Is that now a ridiculous date?
Well, we need action. We need action in Congress, and it's unfortunate that we're sitting here at the end of July when we got a package of legislation from the House, the HEROES Act, back in May, and Mitch McConnell didn't even take up the effort to get another package out of the Senate until last week. So it's been way too long. We've got too many people who need help, and the small business community is at the top of that list. So what we need action now. We need to work together. We need to stop with these competing bills, a Republican bill, a Democratic bill, and we need to sit down at the table. We need to negotiate, and we need to provide the help that small businesses need to stay alive. So that means looking at that August 8th date so that those businesses who may not have gotten a first round loan can get that. And we need a second round so that we can help those businesses that still need help.
Now, I know that you are one of the senators on the Democratic side who actually talk and spend time with some of your GOP colleagues. As I read the situation, a lot of people are saying, hey, the fight's not as much between the Democrats and Republicans right now. It's between Republicans and their White House. Is that how you read it? What are you hearing from your GOP colleagues? And does that create an opportunity at all for the Democrats and Republicans in the Senate to come together and do something, because they're both frustrated with the White House?
Well, what I am hearing is that there are differences of opinion on the Republican side with what the Republican caucus will agree to, and differences between them and the White House. I would hope this is an opportunity for us to sit down together and come up with the help that people really are anxious for. And, Steve, we didn't talk about, because I think people watching this know why small businesses are so important, but they, particularly in my state of New Hampshire, they are the foundation of our economy. 2 out of every 3 jobs that are created by small businesses. They produce 16 times more patents than large businesses. In New Hampshire, they employ over 50% of our workforce. They are absolutely critical. And as you say, if we continue to see those small businesses shutter their doors, then it's going to create problems, not just in terms of the people who are being laid off, though that is tragic enough, but also in terms of the future of our economy, the innovation that's created, the churn that we need to keep people working and to create new jobs. All of that is going to be lost if we don't rescue our small businesses.
One of the interesting things I'm getting to do in this COVID time is I've been doing a daily coronavirus report. And recently I interviewed the comedian Joel McHale. And Joel McHale and a man named Ryan Sarver, who's been an entrepreneur, have been helping something called Frontline Foods and also working with Jose Andres. But their focus is, they said, restaurants are going through a traumatic seizure. And it's workers, it's the owners, it's everyone in the kind of the food chain, and trying to, connect dollars that come in to support it to meals and connecting it to frontline workers. I know that sounds like it's on the sidelines of stuff, but that's what people are doing beyond government. But you could feel in Joel McHale, this incredible concern for that entire industry. Is that the scene in New Hampshire? And are you seeing philanthropists and others step up along with the government in the PPP side?
Well, that is a concern in New Hampshire, and I think across the country. And we're seeing an effort to partner, though the kind of dollars that are going to be needed, I think, are not going to come directly from the private sector. A partnership between the government or the public sector and the private sector, I think, will help this situation. But as they point out to you, it's not just those restaurants and their employees. It's also the farmers who are producing the food, what's happening with the entire food chain. It's also about those landlords or the companies that have the mortgages, if they own their own buildings, and what happens there. And so there is a whole ripple effect to what's going on. It's not just that business and their direct employees, it's what happens to all the ancillary efforts that are part of that business.
So let's wave a wand for a minute. I've been reading about your trip to Big Dave's Bagels. It sounds like a great place. And
it is, for
yeah,
sure.
I'd love to hear, how Big Dave, if there is a Big Dave, sort of sees the scene. And, to partially, the PPP program is working with the Small Business Administration, working with the banking sector and financial institutions, and I'm just interested from a Big Dave's Bagel perspective, how can that really help them more? What can be smoother and better than we've, done thus far with PPP? If you were able to have that conversation with the owners there.
Well, I had a great visit to Big Dave's several weeks ago, and there really is a Big Dave. He and his wife run a bagelry, and until the coronavirus, they also had a catering business, which has pretty much disappeared over the last few months. They still do the majority of their business, or right now they're doing the majority of their business in takeout. And so they're able to benefit because it is summertime. There still are tourists coming through North Conway, where he's located, and they're able to continue their operation. He said a couple of things to me that really struck me. First was that his biggest concern was for his employees. He wanted to be able to continue to see them working. He has a lot of young people there who are students who come in as high school students and stay until they get through college and move on to something else. He was concerned about them. And he was also concerned about what he's seen from some people in terms of how nice they are to each other. He said, we get people in here who are really frustrated right now. And so they're not very nice to some of our employees, to their neighbors. And he was concerned about that. And I thought it was nice to hear him say that, because one of the things I would hope is happening, despite how anxious people are, is that we try and be kind to each other. And so Big Dave is certainly modeling that in terms of how he and his wife, Susan, are taking care of their employees. But one of the other things he said, and I've heard this echoed by other businesses that I've visited, is that right now in New Hampshire, as a northern state, our restaurants are really benefiting from the fact that it is summer and the weather's been good. People are able to sit outside and eat. They can do a lot of takeout because people are comfortable coming in. But what happens when the weather gets cold, when people can't do that anymore? And they are very worried about that.
I think these human stories, human challenges, thinking ahead like that, is we need to do a lot more of it. And part of that is part of knowing this time. And so right now we have, a pandemic, we've got an economic crisis and massive unemployment. And we also have protests around the nation about, our social contract, inclusion, dignity for all races, and police brutality. And so I've been kind of struggling with this, to be honest, about when it comes to business and economic opportunity, what can be done that we're not doing with communities of color, with Hispanic businesses, Black businesses that have been on the sidelines a lot of the opportunities out there, so that we're not just seeing people check off boxes by protesting, but we're really doing something to change the vector of opportunity in this country. Do you see opportunities there? And I know this is sort of a sideball, but I think it's important as we discuss small businesses and how to get the social equation right along with the economic equation.
It's absolutely important, and it's one of the issues that's driving the second round of assistance, the legislation that Ben Card and Chris Coons and I developed, is to try and put some focus on the smallest businesses, so the mom and pop shops, but also minority businesses, because for many of them, because they don't have those long-term relationships with financial institutions, for many of them don't necessarily have a regular banker. They have other financial support. Many of them use their credit cards and have maxed out their credit cards to start their businesses. So we need to think about how we can ensure that they also are in the queue to get help. And that's really the focus of this second round of PPP that we're looking at. And it's also the focus of the Republican efforts that Marco Rubio and Susan Collins have been involved in to try and ensure that we are reaching out to minority-owned businesses, to veteran-owned businesses, to smallest businesses to ensure that they can also get help. And it means not just setting up a program that does that, but it also means having the outreach to get the word out to those small businesses. What I've heard from some of our minority-owned businesses in New Hampshire is that they aren't sure what's available to them and how they access that help. And so we've got to do a better job at reaching out through our small business development centers, through our minority resource centers, and get the word out so they know how to apply for that assistance.
Senator, just last question, and I really appreciate your insights into these areas. You mentioned the smaller business, the mom and pop shop. Recently, I interviewed Aman Bhutani, who is the CEO of GoDaddy. They're the largest registrar of domain names. It's fascinating because when you talk to him, there's this eruption essentially of micro businesses in the country as people try to get jobs on the side or, basically scramble in these times. And Aman shared with me that those small companies get nothing out of the PPP program, that they don't qualify, they're not big enough. And I know Steve Chabot, I'm going to be talking to later in today's program, right, in the GOP, a member of the House, has been trying to say, hey, we need to support those companies that are under 10 employees as well. Is there any serious initiative in the Senate right now? Are you part of that as well to try and get more rounds of PPP or financial support for some of those, I guess, ventures?
Well, for anybody who meets that fewer than 500 criteria, fewer than 500 employees, they do qualify for PPP. The challenge, I think, for many of those very small businesses is that they haven't had the information about the program or the access to financial institutions because of the lack of a relationship with that financial institution. And that's had an impact. But we also need to look at self-employed. We tried to ensure that they were covered under this program. There's been some challenge with the way that got rolled out. But they also need to be able to be covered, and that's got to be part of whatever else we do. In New Hampshire, one of the things that has happened is that the dollars that went to the state of New Hampshire, so we got $1.25 billion in the CARES package, and they have tried to make available some of those dollars as well that would go to self-employed. But it is a challenge, and it's something we've got to work harder on.
Well, Senator Shaheen, I should tell our audience I've enjoyed exchanges with you in Canada, exchanges with you in the Middle East when we all used to travel, and I really look forward to that day when we can do it again. But I'm very grateful for your time, insights on what we need to do by way of supporting our small businesses in America in this stressed out time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks, Steve. Hopefully we can get some agreement very soon in Washington and get the help to those small businesses and so many others in this country who are struggling. So thank you for your efforts, and we will keep at it. And it's nice to exchange views actually in the United States.
Well, thank you very, very much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
And now it's a time for a message from our sponsor, Wells Fargo. Please welcome Nate Hurst, Wells Fargo's EVP of Sustainability and Social Impact, and Lisa Mensah, President and CEO of the Opportunity Finance Network.
Thank you, Steve. So happy to be with all of you today. I'm Nate Hurst, and I'm the head of social impact and sustainability at Wells Fargo. I also lead the Wells Fargo Foundation, and I'm excited to be here with Lisa Mensah, the president and CEO of Opportunity Finance Network, otherwise known as OFN. And I'm sure many of you out there know Lisa as the head of this impactful trade group representing community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, across the country. These nonprofit and community leaders are critical in getting capital and technical training to distressed communities across America and it couldn't be more important than it is today. Lisa also has a very diverse background supporting distressed and disadvantaged communities, including serving as the U.S. Undersecretary of Agriculture for rural communities in the Obama administration. She also funded and served as executive director at the Aspen Institute Initiative on Financial Security, where she worked with nonprofits in the financial industry to promote financial health. And you may not know, but she actually started her career as a banker. So on behalf of Wells Fargo, I'd like to thank the Hill for giving us this opportunity to have this important discussion today. Here we find ourselves in the middle of COVID-19 crisis and perhaps one of the largest challenges the small business community has ever faced. While all small businesses are struggling to survive COVID-19, diverse small businesses, including African American and Black-owned businesses and Latino small businesses in particular, are facing additional systematic barriers that inhibit their growth. And this is such a pivotal time in our nation. So I really want to get to a conversation with Lisa and discussing many of these challenges and opportunities as she's on the front lines working with these small businesses every day. Lisa, again, welcome. I really appreciate your time and you joining us today. Can you start by sharing OFN's approach and the role that CDFIs are taking in addressing the impact of COVID-19 on small businesses?
Thank you, Nate, and thank you to the Hill for putting some more attention on this beautiful field of community development financial institutions. It's so great that so many people are actually learning this acronym because this is a CDFI moment. We now have a national crisis where you need lenders who will lend into this crisis and lend hopefully our way out of it. We have this deep and long history at supporting the communities we serve with our capital. We're small business lenders, housing lenders, affordable facilities lenders. But on the small business side, we're having a moment because everybody realizes the lenders matter. You have to be able to get closest to our smallest businesses. And this is something Wells Fargo has long understood and partnered with us. So I think what's critical about CDFIs is that we take the time, we are capital plus support to industries. We're about 1,000 CDFIs across the country in all 50 states. Some of us have been at this for decades. And what we are doing is bringing that loan capital, giving that extra time, even in this pandemic, so that these businesses can thrive.
And there's so many businesses in need out there, Lisa. How do CDFIs decide which small businesses to help? In particular, how do they grow minority-owned businesses?
Yeah, well, the whole mission of a CDFI is to support businesses right in the deepest pockets of poverty. And so they're very rooted institutions. So you don't have to look far. When you go and visit the Black Business Investment Fund of Florida, they're in their community and they have a 30-year track record of already knowing how to find. They invest, they make follow-on loans. So often what they're doing is starting small. Sometimes there's a chapter of, before you even get to a loan, of critical support, of kind of a consulting role. What is it that you need? Is it a marketing challenge? Maybe you don't want to finance the full expansion of a business. So we are actually lenders who can go an extra mile. Most of us aren't lending on a credit box, we are actually still kind of in-person lenders, or virtual lenders at this stage. But that's what really allows us to take a minority business, which may have been denied from another source, and really sit with that business owner, understand where they're trying to go, understand what their creative idea is, and then support them through sometimes multiple loans to get through and expand their business. That's the kind of lending we do as a field.
Lisa, in the small businesses I talk to, we still have a long way to go in this economic road to recovery. What are you hearing and what do you see the needs being is the next step as we continue to progress and ensure that small businesses get back on their feet?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said ensuring that they get back on their feet, because this battle is winnable. And for so many businesses, they will be able to pivot, but they need lenders who are equipped for the fight. So I really think this is a moment for the federal government to invest, like you have, in our CDFIs. We have $1 billion appropriation request in front of the Congress right now. And I think this is a bipartisan area where we know if we support the kind of lending that CDFIs can do, we will leverage those resources 12 times over. And I think this is really something we can do. We've proved that dollars in the hands of CDFIs matter. And the private sector has stepped up. You've stepped up, Wells, Google stepped up, others have stepped up. And I think the challenge now is to marry those private resources with the federal dollars that will allow us to really lend out of this crisis. And that's why I don't think we should give up. And I think we should just double down on the systems that are needed to really carry our businesses forward.
I couldn't agree more, Lisa. And I would say that what you touched on is all three sectors coming together towards a common vision and purpose is I think what we need, at this this difficult time that in our country's history. So having, nonprofits that really know where the need is, having the financial resources and the scale that government and large corporations have, particularly in the finance sector. I think us all working together and putting all politics aside is absolutely essential to get the U.S. economy back to where it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. We know what to do. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Thank you, Lisa. I'd be remiss if I didn't take this time to learn from you a bit and be able to take it back to our business. As you know, small business is one of the strengths of Wells Fargo. We've been in that line of business for quite some time, and we absolutely believe small business is part of the backbone of the U.S. economy and can help stabilize and grow the economy faster than any other sector. But when you look across the country, you see the fight for economic equality, and I think it's really important as we look to grow the business, our business, that we grow in the right way. So what advice do you have for Wells and frankly the entire financial industry to take away from this moment? What needs to change to address the systemic issues that small businesses face with the financial industry and make sure that they're getting equitable support?
Yeah, I love the question. Thank you for asking it. If there's one thing we've learned from this time of crisis and really reckoning with old systems of injustice and with our health crisis, is that it takes partners who will stay the course. So my first advice is stay strong in your partnerships. And I want to honor what you've been doing. You took your PPP proceeds, your fee income from that, and you plugged it back into the CDFI industry and other small businesses. You created an Open for Business fund, and that's a testament to the seriousness in which you treat partnerships. You're a huge bank, but you can't do it all, and you need partners. And so I want to say, keep leaning into the partners who are needed in this country to move the capital. What we've learned is that we're a sophisticated economy, but the economy needs the kind of capillary financial systems that CDFIs are. So stick with your partners. My second part is lean into the fair, responsibly priced small business loans. This is a sector that we shouldn't give up on, and your reach will always be huge. And so the more you come to market with fair, strong products, it will support our small businesses. So partners, fair products, and a willingness to tackle and to listen so that you're tackling these old systems of injustice with partners. That's my best advice. And I think you've already made a big down payment on that. So.
Well, Thank you so much, Lisa. I can guarantee you that Wells Fargo is not going to give up on small businesses, and
So glad.
really appreciate your partnership and support right out of the gates with the Open for Business Fund, and making sure that those much needed funds are getting distributed to those small businesses that need them most, particularly those hit the hardest by COVID-19 and minority-owned businesses.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Great to be a partner with all your work. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Nate and Lisa, that was a terrific exchange. I really enjoyed it, learned a lot from it. I particularly liked how Lisa said, in this time, what we need to do is keep small businesses afloat on their feet. This is a time of crisis. This is hopefully, as friends of mine have said that are in big business, they've said there will be another side to this. So I really appreciate that perspective. Before we move forward to the next conversation, a quick reminder, you can tweet us at The Hill Events using hashtag, and I got this wrong the first time, hashtag The Hill Small Biz with a Z. Across the country and around the corner, we're seeing the pandemic take a terrible toll on our favorite restaurants, our barbershops, our gyms, so many places. Employees furloughed or laid off, some businesses shuttered forever. As Congress takes action to stop the bleeding, we need to hear from those folks running these small businesses, running these associations of small businesses who know this space all too well. Understand how to tackle inequities so help gets to those who need it most. I'm pleased to be joined by Natalie Huerta, owner of the Queer Gym in Oakland, California. I want to join. And it's online, I hear. So we can get there in a minute. Regina Smith, Executive Director of the Harlem Business Alliance, and my friend Ramiro Cavazos, President and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. It's really great to be with all three of you. And Natalie, I was so excited to have you on today and hear a lot of people. One, I totally support the notion of a safe, non-judgmental, great space to work out and to find one's place in the queer gym where you are. But this COVID crisis hit you hard. Give a snapshot of your story.
Yes, thank you for having me. And so I own a gym here in Oakland, the Queer Gym. We were founded in 2010. We're the first LGBTQ gym in the nation, providing tailored training to the transgender community who's preparing for gender reassignment surgery or gender affirmation surgery. And, we've been online ever since quarantine happened. And it was just a split decision because we had no control over the situation. We just had control over what we could do and our resources and our creativity and our innovation and our community. And so there was no hesitation to tackle what the road was going to be ahead. So we just took initiative and leaned into the situation. We became Zoom masters overnight. We studied how to create connection and community via online. And we just really tried our best to keep a positive attitude and look for the silver lining in the situation, which, at that point is more of a mental hardship than anything else. But I think it was definitely the positive attitude, the grit that really helped us push through those first initial weeks of this pandemic. And now we've kind of found our groove in this new landscape, and we've been able to really push forward. We were blessed enough to have tripled our membership since quarantine back in March. And as we lean into more opportunities, more and more opportunities seem to come up. And it's been, I guess, mindset is really what I've been the most thankful for in this whole thing.
Well, and I just want to know that you did take PPP funds. And I want to jump to Regina because, I know not everyone has had your success, that there's been kind of some have done well in these times, but, the shocking economic data today where the U.S. economy has contracted 33% over the last quarter is just remarkable. But you took PPP loans. Was it a smooth process? Did it help you keep your employees on? And just real quickly, is there anything you would change about the process?
We received the PPP loan, the second round, and as a business owner, I was surprised I got it. I was surprised I got it, and it was a smooth process. It definitely made an impact. More than anything, of course, it helps with payroll and operation costs, but it helped with a peace of mind. Right? That's really where it became essential for me as a leader. It was knowing that at the end of the day, I still could keep my employees on, and I could still operate and still serve the community. It was just that financial breath gave us the peace of mind to be able to concentrate on what we needed to do to get ahead.
Regina, you work a Harlem Business Alliance with all sorts of different businesses. And, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is a time of a triple crisis, right? Health, economy, racial divides in this nation. And I'm just wondering, what's your North Star with your client base and trying to sort of not only survive in this moment, but prevail?
Well, it's been extremely difficult for businesses here in the Harlem community. Black businesses have been in a state of crisis prior to the pandemic. So the pandemic just absolutely threw everyone into a tailspin. So like most entrepreneurs, our clients are working hard to pivot to make the best of a horrible situation. Access to capital has been extremely difficult. Accessing the PPP funds were problematic. We knew that the first round of monies were inadequate for all the small business needs across the nation, and that we most likely would not get any. When the second round became available, we were concerned about being waitlisted, placed at the bottom of the wait list. And so we were encouraged to submit multiple applications. And then we were told that if you submitted multiple applications, that those applications would be thrown out. So there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of fear, basically, that applications wouldn't be reviewed and wouldn't be approved and funded. And so it helped tremendously when we had some of our local CDFIs to join the fray and to provide financing. There wasn't enough technical assistance provided to businesses. And our micro entrepreneurs, the ones that really weren't targeted with the funding, didn't receive the type of outreach, the marketing outreach. So I would say that moving forward, that is critically important that a program be designed for micro entrepreneurs, for those businesses, the majority of small businesses in this nation actually that have less than 20 employees. There should be a targeted fund for micro entrepreneurs. CDFI should be capitalized, and community-based organizations that have long, deep ties to their community should also be funded to do this work, to provide the outreach, to provide the technical assistance as well. We were on the phone with our clients 7 days a week, all hours of the day and evening, because everyone was trying their best to access these funds. So I don't want to take up too much time, but we absolutely have to do better. Black businesses in New York City are doing horribly, and I would imagine aren't faring well across the nation.
Well, I'm glad you're here saying that and raising, punctuating that issue, because people are listening to this, and we do have the policy community on hand. I'm interested that if you made this statement, I heard that, not everybody's watching CNN or MSNBC, that there are a lot of folks not in those networks, and that we need to do a better job of educating, reaching, and kind of creating a literacy of these opportunities. So we got a lot of folks listening. What do you think this crowd needs to hear? What does the political and policy community hear? What do the banks need to hear to help your world get better?
So again, the Small Business Administration does not have a good reputation of working with small businesses and with Black businesses in particular. It didn't happen during the Obama administration, and it's not happening now. So it's critically important that that these lending institutions and that the government actually engages grassroots organizations that are doing this work and that are connected to the communities. Oftentimes, these organizations are not adequately funded to do the work, although we have relationships with people within our community. I am a Harlem resident, born and bred. I grew up here. I still live here. I know tons of people in this community. Right. And if organizations such as ours were funded to do this kind of work, then I think that we could be a lot more successful. Also, you need to listen to what the needs of small businesses actually are. And you need to find out how they do their work and understand how they finance their businesses. Because oftentimes, I mean, one of the critical issues here was that if you did not pull money out of your business through a payroll account, you weren't eligible for funding. So this is a horrible time to find out that you don't have the proper documentation, that you haven't been operating your business according to guidelines that other people set forth. But if we're really interested in trying to save the few remaining businesses that we have and sustaining them and helping them to grow, we have to do a lot better. So that's what I would encourage people to do, is to actually dig deep into these communities and stop developing programs that you think best meets our needs.
Thank you for that. You know, Ramiro, I couldn't think of a better panel to be on than this one with Natalie and Regina. This is very real, high traction. You run really the largest Hispanic business association in America, and you and I have done a lot of things together in the past. I don't know how your members are doing. You know, you have every kind of member out there, but what's the map for them? Are they? You know, we have a story here from Regina where it's a terrible time in Harlem. You know, we have the story from Natalie Huerta, who turned on a dime, made lemonade out of lemons and is a king. What's the situation, more broadly in the national scene on Hispanic business?
Well, thank you, Steve, for having me. On behalf of our chairwoman, Carmen Castillo, herself an immigrant-owned business, we give you and Natalie and Regina warm greetings. There's no question that the economy was already struggling before the virus hit. As I know Regina and Natalie know, small minority and women-owned businesses, LGBTQ businesses were barely eking by, and it wasn't an insolvency problem that our businesses were having. It was really a lack of liquidity. And so when the virus hit, as you already know, 4.7 million Hispanic-owned businesses, just the segment that we represent at the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, 1 out of every 3 of our businesses are already closed. Many of them did not get the PPP loans in the first or the second round. And quite frankly, only $4 billion of the close to $160 billion plus have gone, actually $400 billion have gone to Hispanic-owned businesses. So the silver lining, though, Steve, is that our businesses are already reinventing themselves. As you've heard from Natalie, her business has grown. Businesses in Harlem are going to have more tenacity as we move forward. They'll have more access to non-traditional sources of capital. The Small Business Administration only had about 1,000 lending certified entities before COVID hit. Now there are more than 5,000 out there, and there are financial fintechs that are out there, credit unions, state and local governments, and companies that have stepped up to start up their own fund. So quite frankly, Steve, I think this is a time that all of us, especially at the Chamber, we've benefited by listening and responding to necessity. More technical assistance. Regina mentioned that was not provided before. Now we're providing that in spades. English and Spanish access, multiple languages. This is a time for reinvention and using the digital age that we were not embracing at the time to really look forward to help our businesses. So we thank you for this forum, because we know that we're just now beginning and the recovery will be slow. This is a deep recession, global, but I've seen tremendous acts of solidarity amongst people throughout the world during this difficult time. And I think it's going to prepare us well for a recovery that will be slow, but it will be authentic.
Thank you. I want to ask Natalie something in just a minute, but before I get to her, Ramiro, real quick form, short form, pretend I'm Mitch McConnell. What do I need to hear? What needs to be in the next Senate package, the Senate passed package on supporting this country and on the small business portion?
Well, if you were Mitch McConnell's, Steve, I would ask for more direct payments to families that have struggled throughout this country. It was not enough the first round. Two, I would make sure that there's additional capital provided to small minority women-owned businesses that because of their lack of liquidity and they missed the first round because they were put at the end of the line. If they applied, they had their credit scores affected and their reputations affected. So then they didn't qualify for PPP. So I would make these loans truly forgivable, easy for $150,000 or less with no credit checks. It would be the full backing of the government. The third thing I would say to Mitch McConnell is that our U.S. government is the largest buying service in the world, and it is not spending enough with businesses that are represented by the three of us. Less than 7% of the contracting by the federal government is not sufficient. We pay taxes. We need to have that equal percentage of the 33 million small businesses participate in public procurement. And the last point I would tell Mitch McConnell is get Fortune 1000 firms to put more people that look like us on their corporate boards because we represent the future. This is not corporate social responsibility anymore. 70% of the U.S. economy, still the strongest economy in the world, is represented by consumer spending. And we represent that future, the future of the workforce of those companies and the vendors that they'll need in the future. So it just makes good business sense. So that's what I would ask Mitch McConnell is put more money out there, make it forgivable, get corporate leaders and government leaders to spend money with our businesses.
Well, Ramiro, I know that there are some people who are close to Mitch McConnell watching today's show, so I hope they pass all that on to him. I'll do this. Natalie, let me ask you a question. And again, just short form, because I've got two audience questions lined up for the three of you. But I guess we have two powerful association chiefs here that deal with the broad, they deal with folks that are in your area. What did you find? What did you reach inside yourself in this time? When you talked about changing on a dime, doing this, I mean, you talked about it as if it was nothing, it was just there. But I'm just interested in what is replicable about what you did that you can convey to our two friends on this panel that might be useful as they talk to their members.
The first thing that comes to mind is, I think part of the reason why I was able to pivot so much is just leaning into the resiliency that has been instilled in me as a female, as a Latinx, as a queer person, as a small business owner. Like, those communities are made out of resilience. And so at the end of the day, we're going to be all right, but it would be great to get some assistance from our leaders. So to answer your question, I think Regina hit it right on the nose in terms of saying, if we don't know that help is available, how are we supposed to reach for it? And furthermore, the education piece and the technology piece, because a lot of my fellow entrepreneur brothers and sisters had no idea about Zoom, had no idea how to apply. And so, Ramiro brought up, solidarity amongst us, and that's really been what's kind of been making up what's been missing for us from government, from leaders, is we just help out each other the best that we can. I can go on and on about, me facilitating small business group Zoom meetings about how to use Zoom. What's your accountant doing for this, and how's your PPP loan going? And so the solidarity just among the small business entrepreneurs has really been, it's been inspiring, to say the least.
So community, mentorship, show and tell, those are elements of what's important. That's what I'm hearing from you, right?
Yes.
Let me take a question. We have Jabari Jones. Jabari Jones, and I'm going to direct this towards Regina. Jabari?
My name is Jabari Jones, and I'm the president of the West Philadelphia Corridor Collaborative, a large business association in Philadelphia. My question is, what should chambers of commerce and business associations on the local level be advocating for to ensure that there's an inclusive recovery?
Question. Thank you, Jabari. Regina, I'm going to let you hit that one.
So what you need to do is to, of course, being in close contact with your members, you need to speak to your elected officials, to your financial institutions, and also to the educational institutions. You have some world-renowned universities, the University of Pennsylvania. They need to be a lot more involved in improving the quality of work that's done. The contracting needs to be improved considerably. Oftentimes, Black businesses are totally ignored when it comes to contracting and procurement opportunities. That certainly has been the case here in New York during the pandemic. I mean, billions of dollars flew out the window to primarily, I would say about 95% of those contracts and maybe more went to white firms. That's untenable, and it's unacceptable, and frankly, it's also criminal because as Ramiro mentioned, we are paying taxes. We support these, we support local, state, and federal government. And so we should be able to access greater resources, access to capital, and capital that is patient. So what I mean by patient capital is that sometimes it should be interest only. It should definitely be low interest loans. And in some cases, the government, yes, it shouldn't have been a forgivable loan. It should have been a grant for small businesses. And that's what I advocate for moving forward. Micro entrepreneurs should receive small grants. So I think that that's critically important, but we absolutely have to obtain the resources, get our percentage of procurement contracts, so that we can support our communities and we can reduce these disparities, which are huge within the Black community.
We have another question, but we're running out of time, and I'm just going to ask Ramiro and Natalie just to give me very, very quick response. And so I'm going to read it from Jeanne Robinson. My question is, what support will be given to minority-owned businesses where credit approval might be an issue? And then this follow-up is that, how can lenders and legislators and others come to make sure that minority and Black-owned businesses are aware of the funds are available? So I'd just be interested in your very quick insights, Ramiro and Natalie, on that front, if you have thoughts on that. Ramiro?
Well, I just need to say that ideas are not actions, Steve, and we've had the CRA and so many wonderful programs aimed at contributing to providing more access to capital. But at the end of the day, those aren't actions. Those are just ideas. We are, if anything that's been proven about capital, and very quickly just want to say, we're all more interconnected than we thought we were before. You could not ignore the LGBT community, the Black community, the Asian or the Latino community, because that business leases that commercial office from your building, and you own a note on that building that you owe at the bank. And if you lose those businesses, and many of them have gone out of business, and we don't support them through contracting or procurement or capital, we're all going to be affected ultimately.
Appreciate it. Natalie, quick thoughts? I'm sorry.
I would love for the credit report, the credit rating situation to be obsolete in this moment. I mean, this is very unique times. And I can tell you that I was a business that was impacted, didn't qualify because of my credit score, because I'm trying to survive my business and I'm throwing everything on a credit card. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that situation. So we can eliminate that. I know how many people would have a positive impact from that, just that alone.
Okay, so real quick before you go, you've tripled your membership. Are you maxed out now? You're doing this all online. Do you want more members?
Yes, we are 100% online right now. So all of you watching, come through and get in shape with us. And what we're going through right now is, we're still kind of navigating. We've been blessed to have grown, but with that also comes different operating procedures and things like that. So we're trying to finagle our way through that right now.
Well, listen, what a pleasure it's been. I wish we could go on and on. Ramiro Cavazos of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Regina Smith of the Harlem Business Alliance, what incredible things you're doing. Natalie Huerta, it was great to hear about your success and pivot with the Queer Gym. Thank you all for sharing your insights today.
Thank you, Steve.
My next guest is the ranking member of the House Committee on Small Business. He's served on the committee since being elected to Congress in 1994. He's an independent-minded, get-it-done kind of guy. I've had the pleasure of speaking to him in the past. He's been closely monitoring the rollout and the efficacy of the Paycheck Protection Program. Welcome, Representative Steve Chabot of Ohio. Great to see you again, sir. You know, one of the things, earlier today, I had occasion to talk to Aman Bhutani, and Aman is the CEO of GoDaddy, one of the largest e-commerce domain registration sites in the nation. And he's saying, hey, Steve, I get there's a lot going on that's right on PPP, and let's all pat ourselves on the back, but there's a whole range of firms out there, businesses that are not getting the support they need. I know this is a priority of yours. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, a number of things, and anything we do has to ultimately be done in a bipartisan manner and bicameral as well. You know, we need Republicans and Democrats working together, and we need the House and Senate and the administration working together. For the most part, we've been doing that, and we have actually modified, as you know, the PPP program a number of times since it was first passed back in March. It was part of the CARES Act, over $2 trillion bill, and about $350 billion of that was for the PPP program. And a number of things that I've been doing just this week and last week as well. We've introduced a couple of bills. One of them is the PPP and the Micro Success Act, which essentially would cover just those small businesses that are 10 or fewer employees. It would put aside about $20 billion of the next round, and there will be a next round. We don't know exactly when. I hope Congress gets its act together soon. I wanted it to happen this week. It looks like it'll be next week at this time. So that would actually target, for example, the smallest of small businesses. It would make them available for the Small Business Development Center, which we have 1,000 of them or so across the country. They would get mentoring. They would get access to capital, a whole range of things. So we do need to focus on the smallest of the small as well as everybody else.
Congressman, have you folks begun to look at fixing? I mean, I know it's hard when you're rushing in the middle of a crisis. You know, you look over your shoulder later and say, hey, what do we do? But, you know, Kanye West, LA Lakers, you know, big organizations that were getting the loans. Has that problem largely been solved, or is it still embedded in the system that it's not just small businesses that are getting this, but some very large businesses that have other capital sources are getting some of these funds?
Yeah, there's no question that because of how rapid this was put together, you know, the virus hit, Congress tried to act in real time. So some things, there were glitches. I mean, I don't think anybody envisioned, you know, the LA Lakers, for example, getting a loan, or Harvard being involved, you know, a whole range of these things. We're doing very aggressive oversight now. Nydia Velázquez, who's the Democratic chairwoman of the committee now, and she was my ranking member when I chaired the committee the last two Congresses, and now I'm her ranking member. So we worked very closely together, and we had over Mnuchin, the head of the Treasury Department, and Carranza, the head of the Small Business Administration, in oversight, finding out what's going on, what changes need to be made. The EIDL loan program, too, that's had even more challenges, things that need to be modified in that program. So we're looking at all those abuses that occurred. We think there were approximately, for example, in the EIDL loan program, there may be 5,000 or so that went awry, that people that shouldn't have got them. Sometimes it was duplication. They might have got two loans. Sometimes that they weren't eligible in the first thing. And so there are those things happening with the PPP program as well. And so we're trying to reach a balance. The balance is making sure there's no waste, fraud, and abuse, making sure that the companies that were intended to get this, get them. And that, so that's the one thing. On the other hand, we don't want to make it so burdensome and over-regulated that it's impossible to get the loans out the door in real time, because this problem happened quickly and virtually took down the American economy with it.
Right. Steve, this may sound like a little bit of a personal question, but are you wearing your Liberty boots?
You saw that, huh? Not today. Yeah, I haven't actually worn it. My wife said we have to put this special stuff on them to make sure that they're waterproof. So she did that over the weekend. So I'm waiting for a parade.
Well,
actually,
to bring our audience in on the joke, you spent a lot of time visiting small businesses. I understand you go out and you go meet with small businesses, take their temperatures, see what's going well, help out those that are not. And you visited Dan Tormey, as I understand, of Liberty Western, which is a Western apparel. So tell me about Dan's story, PPP, and the boots.
Yeah, he got a loan, probably wouldn't have been able to stay open and keep his employees on the payroll without it. And that's the case with so many other small businesses across the country. He happens to have a Western supply place and for, cowboys, for lack of a better term, and ranching and horse equipment, a lot of stuff, to be quite honest with you, I'm not all that familiar with. And he sells boots, like, Western type boots. And I'm in Cincinnati, greater Cincinnati, Ohio, so it's not something I'm terribly familiar with. And I saw these boots. It was love at first sight. There's stars and stripes going up on the side. And I'm not much of a shopper. And I came home and I thought my wife was going to, what in the world are you doing? She thought they were pretty cool. And I never buy clothes. She always buys my stuff for me. So, and I thought this is a way to contribute to this small business. And I put them on my personal credit card and bought the boots. And I love them, even though I haven't had a chance to wear them yet.
Well, I've seen a picture of them and they look great. So they look patriotic and they look great. Steve, let me ask you a question. And there are a lot of folks watching this. In fact, we had a very powerful last panel. Wells Fargo had a sponsored content session where it was sort of looking at how to reach into corners of the economy and not. And I asked this of everybody, Democrats who've been around for decades or Republicans. Look, what did we, I guess part of the question was, what did we get wrong? But I don't want to have an hour-long program. What can we begin to get right by ways of reaching more minority-owned businesses, more communities of color? And when we're sitting here in the middle of the COVID crisis and you looked at the impact of that and the way these communities are taking a disproportionate share of infections, minorities, all this, and, so this is a big question. How do we begin to even out opportunity in the small business way in ways that we haven't done it before? Have you thought about this at all?
Oh, thought about it a lot, absolutely. And I actually represent, as I said, greater Cincinnati, and I have the urban core of Cincinnati as well. And we have obviously a lot of economically disadvantaged businesses, and we've been working to solve that problem. And what we saw is that a lot of the smallest of the small businesses, especially in minority and economically disadvantaged locations, they didn't necessarily have a strong relationship with a bank or with a credit union. So when it came to getting the PPP loans, they had a hard time, some. Now, ultimately, a lot of them have gotten into it at this point, but early on, it was tough. The more sophisticated companies, who oftentimes were larger small businesses, small business, after all, can be up to 500 employees under most circumstances, they had a great relationship with the bank, and they might have been treated, as a premier client. And so the little folks, the little guy, didn't have access. So at this point, we're making sure that that's taken care of. And in fact, we ran out of money, as most people know, within 2 weeks. That's how successful the program was, $350 million. So we had the PPP Enhancement Act, and in that round, we set aside a specific amount. It was $60 billion that went to the smaller banks, the smaller credit unions, CDFIs, the community development financial institutions, to minority depositories, to micro lenders. So those folks that were going to get it more into those economically disadvantaged communities. So we learned a lot of lessons as we've gone along. I actually have co-sponsored a bill with Dwight Evans, a congressman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania. He approached me with what I thought was a good idea. He said, we've had this unrest, the civil disorder out there as a result of the George Floyd killing. And we've had a lot of these businesses burned down in tough neighborhoods through no fault of their own. So can we help those small businesses? So he came up with a bill that I've co-sponsored with him, and it would say that these small businesses that were damaged, maybe even burnt out or looted, that want to reopen or get back into business, that loans would be available for them, and 75%, not all, but 75% would be forgivable. So kind of like the PPP, but that's 100% forgivable if you spend it in a certain way. I thought it was a good idea. So I'm working with Dwight Evans to get that done.
Thank you for raising that. Congressman, we've been taking some questions from the audience, and we have one for you from Sandra. Sandra?
Over the past year, even pre-pandemic, our 15-member women-led council has really zeroed in on the issue of lack of affordable or even available childcare, specifically in childcare deserts. We hear from women across the country, and this issue has just really exploded post-pandemic. So my question is this: are there any indications that Congress and key leadership may consider set-asides for certain industries such as childcare and even telehealth services in this next tranche of funding?
So,
I think
Sandra
that-
Pretorius,
yeah.
so good question on telehealth and childcare.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. And one of the great challenges that people in our American economy face all the time. You want to go to work, but you have to provide for your children, and childcare is critical. And there are various federal programs and tax credits that are currently available, but that's one of the things under discussion in this next tranche. Now, exactly when that'll happen or how much it'll be or what the circumstances will be remains to be seen. And it has to be bipartisan, bicameral, House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats and the administration agree to it. But I think you raise a great point, and it's something that Congress is considering very seriously right now.
Just before I let you go, Congressman, this has been a great conversation. We should do it more.
Mm-hmm.
I always learn from you.
I'll wear my boots next time.
Yeah, please do, please do. And I'll wear something special as well. But just a final question. Tomorrow on the Hill's coronavirus report, I have this cool interview coming out, as I mentioned, with the CEO of GoDaddy, Aman Bhutani. And GoDaddy, of course, is the largest registration home for domain names in the e-commerce space in the United States. And they have something called Venture Forward. And they said, look, while all of this trauma is going on in small business, there's a very different scene going on in these micro businesses, new ventures being launched, people creating businesses on the side of their work or in lieu of their work. But he said, I said, what does Washington know about that? And he goes, nothing. Washington doesn't see it, doesn't know about it, isn't part of it. And he mentioned Denison, Texas, and Denison, Texas stepping forward and saying, we need to incubate more of these. And that they've created and helped support 10 new e-commerce sites. Now, there are lots more out there, but these are ones that they helped incubate. So I would just ask you, because you're in this scene and you've already talked about microventures, mm-hmm. What do we need to do to enhance the literacy of your colleagues about that level of business and the kind of nimbleness that it gives the economy that they may not see?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that Washington doesn't know about that. And one thing I would say up front is probably they may be lucky that Washington doesn't know about it completely, because once we know about it, we're going to overregulate it, we're going to overtax it and everything else. So stay under the radar if at all possible. Now, in all seriousness, when I was chairman, we actually had a hearing on the gig economy and what's happening out there and how we can help it and how we can make sure that we don't screw it up, basically. So there's all kinds of creative ways of people doing things smarter and quicker and better and cheaper. And it certainly is an alternative to the normal job scene that we've seen, over the decades. So it's important. It's going to be a growing part of the economy, and we welcome their being successful and creative and profitable and keeping as much as possible. But in all seriousness, back to what I said originally, we don't want Congress to kill it. And if we get too involved in it, that's probably what we'll end up doing. So be successful out there, and we'll try to keep government off of your backs.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make sure he sees that, and I'll send you what he shares too. Well, Representative
Very
Steve
good.
Chabot, it's always a pleasure. Ranking member of the House Small Business Committee. Really appreciate your insights and thoughts today. And I will take you up on a exchange when you're wearing your boots.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our program today. A big thank you to our sponsor, Wells Fargo, for supporting these fascinating set of exchanges, and to all of you attendees for joining us for this very, very important discussion, which isn't going to go away today. This is something we're going to keep raising and going at over time here at the Hill. For those of you who missed any of the conversations this afternoon, we will have this video up from this event up on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemens. Be well.